My favorite comment we got at public comment from one of the neighbors, well, if you build this, gangs are going to come in. And it was just such an unjustified comment. And the truth is we build these things and nothing happens, except there's more tax revenue coming in, right?
Yeah,
it's usually, it's usually good things that happen once we're done.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 182. Today, we're going to talk about the journey of becoming a real estate developer. A lot of people think that this is a sexy career to get into, but is it? My guest today is going to help us figure that out. Bradley Hartwell is the founder and real estate strategist with Northtown Real Estate, a West Michigan real estate firm specializing in acquisition, brokerage, consulting, and development of residential and commercial properties. And he's a professor of real estate at Central Michigan University, teaching principles of real estate development through their College of Business. Bradley, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
So it's really awesome to have you here because I've always wanted to talk about development, but in 180 episodes or so, I haven't had that conversation yet. So,
that's surprising. That's great.
Yeah. So I'm really excited. I know you brought some examples and stories, and I mean, you've been doing it, so you have real knowledge of it. But before we get into all that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Thank you again for having me on board. That was great intro. I recently, I formed Northtown as kind of an investment real estate company for just holding my personal real estate investments I've had. So I never really meant it to be an operating company. And through kind of the pathways of our careers, I kind of landed there. And I did that for about 2.5 years. And I bumped into my partners now with Pure Real Estate, and we kind of decided to roll our companies into one, which is what Pure Real Estate is now today. I guess I probably should have started at the beginning of the journey, so to speak.
Yeah, what got you started in real estate in the first place?
Yeah, so I was actually a finance major at Central Michigan University, a number of years ago, and they started a real estate development and finance program while I was there. So I was one of 12 of the first graduates of that program. And unfortunately, we graduated in 2009, which was shortly after 2008. And so it wasn't a great time to, graduate with a real estate degree. So I kind of, bumped around and tried to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, after college. And so I've done a number of different things and different facets in the real estate industry, which really was somewhat by design and prepared me to kind of be a developer, because you have to wear a lot of hats. You have to be in the driver's seat of the manager, the title agent, the banker, the leasing agent, the brokers. There's a lot of components that go into it. So having touched a lot of those different industries really helped me and really prepared me to be a more successful developer and investor in the future. So it really started, a lot of people kind of fall backwards into being a real estate developer, but there was actually a school program that I went to learn how to do it, essentially. So.
Yeah, so you learn how to do it, and now you teach how to do it. Yeah. And somewhere in between you've been doing it. You got a number of projects under your belt. So let's talk about the journey of becoming a real estate investor.
Sure.
And using examples from your own life. I mean, what does it take to become a real estate investor, and how did you get started as a real estate investor?
Yeah, sure. I think it really starts with education and educating oneself. And I don't mean that necessarily in the institutional sense. Like, I'm not saying that you have to go to college or a university or something. That a lot of people learn this business through kind of the school of hard knocks, so to speak. And but I think it's important to learn something new every day and find somebody that knows how to do this stuff better than you do, and listen to them and learn from them. And I wake up every single day that way. I teach real estate, for a Division I institution, and I still feel like I don't know anything. I don't know everything, right? So I love waking up in the morning knowing that I'm going to learn something new. So I think that's just so critical for this industry. And I think you need to have an insatiable need to create and to make things better. A lot of times I joke with my partners about the fact that we create problems for ourselves and then we have to solve them, right? And it's a series of solving problems and putting out fires and doing things like that. And then one of the things that I wasn't prepared for when I became a developer is how long it takes to do deals. So I think you have to learn this, like Jedi meditation level of patience because it just takes so long for some deals to come together.
Yeah, well, definitely when you're acquiring a property, an existing property, you go through the financing phase and negotiating the contract, which can take anywhere from a couple of days to 6 to 12 months.
Right.
But at least you know what the property is. You can see it. Everybody
Sure.
can look at it and acquire it. But when you're developing, you're basically starting with a blank piece of paper, blank slate.
That's a great point. Yeah. On the most recent townhome projects that we've done, you go through the entitlement process with the local municipalities. And like you said, you're really, in one case, we were buying a cornfield, that didn't really have any zoning. It was zoned agricultural. So, you start that process. And I think it took us 2 years until we're breaking ground.
So, okay, 2 years
to start
from cornfield to breaking ground takes 2 years. Let's take us through that process.
Yeah.
What is the process? You talked about working with the city. What do you?
Yeah,
need to do?
There's different personalities in all these different municipalities, of course, but it starts with finding the right site, I guess, we always start with the school district, if we're talking about a residential type project and
primarily, are you doing residential development?
Currently, yeah. I really consider myself kind of a generalist. My passion was to do every type of, real estate asset class. I really I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into one industry or another, because if residential is in the toilet, then I need to be able to go do office or industrial or wherever the demand is, and I think that's kind of our number one job as developers, is to kind of have the crystal ball and be able to identify where the demand is.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you identify where the demand is, looking at the school system. That's one way that you do that.
Yeah. So for residential, that's kind of where we start, because a lot of people have families and, unfortunately we have a lot of divorcees as part of our demographics where, maybe they have their children half the time or something like that. And it's nice for one of the parents to be in whatever school district that they want to keep their children in, or those types of things. So we start there just because it's a big selling point. And, if you have a good school district, 9 times out of 10, you got a good community. And then we kind of confirm the demographics. We do like a demographic analysis to see, who lives there, how much do they make, how much disposable income do they have, and we really, truly analyze all those things so that we know if they can afford the rents that we're projecting, of course, people are going to move to the area, but do the current demographics support what we're trying to do? So I think that's where it starts. And if those two things are in alignment, then you kind of dump that data into the financial analysis that you end up doing. And then if it appears that, hopefully you're being conservative on your underwriting, but if that all makes sense, then you kind of pull the trigger and go from there.
So let's talk about financial analysis here. Most of your developments, you're building residential that you're going to hold on to and rent out, or are you also building like townhomes or condos or subdivisions?
Yes.
Yes to all.
Yeah. The projects that we've been working on most recently are pretty flexible, and that's kind of by design. And my partners have done 20 projects that are like this, which consists of about 1,000 units. And every one of them has converted to a condo unit and sold off as a home, as a single family home. They're condos, but as a single family home ownership. And so we build our projects as a rental community, so that we don't have to phase it. And then we fill up the units. And And what that does is it gives us some flexibility with what's going on in the marketplace. So if we get done and we do a first fill and we decide to sell them right away, if the market's like it is today or like it has been, where it's, relatively easy for folks to get a residential mortgage and interest rates are low, then it makes all the sense in the world for us to do a kind of a for sale condo strategy. But we have the flexibility to convert or not convert. I mean, it could remain an apartment community indefinitely, so to speak.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So you build them as residential rentals.
Correct. Yeah.
So you don't have to phase it. That is, meaning that you don't have to build just like one building at a time. You can build all of your units at one time because you're just going to fill them with renters.
Right.
And it's easier that way than if you were to sell them as individual condos?
Yeah, for those that remember, 2008 and the times thereafter, you'd see from the highway the cornfield with one house in it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And we saw those during the Great Recession.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And that's what you want to avoid. Because if you've got the whole thing built out, at least you've got the asset. Now you've got and you can start making
cash flow off of that asset.
Yeah. And even if those projects were able to build all their units, worst case scenario, they could have leased them to kind of cover their debt service or their mortgage payment. And so that's what we really try to avoid is when you do, single family home development or condominium development site, even if it's like a site condominium development, typically the banks want you to phase it, right? So you sell one, you build one, you sell one, you build one. Well, if the economy turns while you're doing that, it's not going to be good for anybody, including the bank. So we build it as a rental community because you can kind of build it all at once, and then we start doing leasing and fill them up and kind of go from there, and then see where the market is after that. So if the market turns, we can always continue to lease our units, or we can sell them. I mean, it provides multiple avenues for us to be pretty flexible with our strategy and what we're doing kind of going forward.
Right. So each unit is parceled individually. It has its own property tax, has its own split utilities.
It could in the future. We have the ability to do that in the future. So we do it through a conversion process. And the reason we do that is because it just makes it easier. We want to avoid having, 72 water bills and tax bills and different things like that. So we really keep it as a single parcel apartment community, like any apartment complex would be at the forefront. And really any apartment complex has the ability to convert to condos down the road if they want. You can come in and kind of start going through the conversion process. And so it's kind of something that we hold off on until we actually decide to do it that way. But
you have the flexibility when you feel it's time.
Correct.
That you can sell off each individual unit to a homeowner.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just kind of a conversation we have with our banks and financiers. I mean, it's a open dialogue because they're certainly a part of the deal, obviously, and so they kind of know what our exit strategy could be on that type of scenario, and it just it provides kind of ultimate flexibility, and you avoid the single unit and standing alone in the cornfield type of situations. So
yeah, that shows good foresight because you don't know what the economy is going to be like when these units are up and ready. So let's talk about the financial analysis part. Is it a matter of looking at what are the rents in the area? What could you rent this out for per square foot? And then what are your costs per square foot to build? Is it as simple as that, or what do you look at in your financial analysis?
I think it's so I always try to avoid paralysis by analysis, where you can analyze something to death, and then if you never do it, then what good is your financial analysis anyway, right? So I try to start with demographics, because I think that's the most important. How many people are living there, and then more importantly, in a particular community. And usually usually I use drive times because it's a little bit more accurate than kind of the radii rings that we throw on a map. And so I do 5, 10, and 15-minute drive times. And we use...
what does that mean, drive times? Like?
So we use census data through the S3 as a resource for the census data, and we're able to identify kind of a drive time area. So it kind of does a 5-minute drive time kind of heat map type of ring around a particular community. What that means is anybody that lives within a 5-minute drive time from our particular site that we're analyzing at that time. So, and I do 5, 10, and 15 minute rings. And I do that because I want to know how many people are living there. And then more specifically, I want to know how many people are living there that make, and I'll just pick a number, but, how many people there make $55,000 a year or more, right? So then if we apply a 30% factor for what people should be spending on housing choices, then I know I can now say that there are 1,000 people that live within a 5-minute drive time that make $55,000 a year or more, and and can afford our rents based on where our analysis is coming in.
Because your rent's 55, so a third of 55,000 would be roughly 18,000, which means that they can pay what about $1,400 a month in rent?
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
Yeah. And I just kind of picked a number out of thin air, but, the way that we've been pricing our townhome units is very consistent with we've seen all the urban apartments, being built in downtown Grand Rapids, and, our townhome units are 2 and 3 bedroom units, 1,370 square feet to 1,520 square feet, something like that. And so quite a bit larger than some of the 2 bedrooms that are built in the urban core, but they're priced almost the same.
Yeah, because you're not building in the urban core; you're kind of outside.
Correct. We have built in the urban core, but currently we've been looking to the near neighborhoods in the suburban areas, just because I'm not ready to say overbuilding for downtown Grand Rapids, but certainly there's been a lot of units that have come online, and it's just going to get competitive. And of course there's an affordability conversation that's being had right now. And truly, there's a couple different factions, but the more supply you bring on, tenants now have choices and they can begin to negotiate their lease rates and things like that. So over time, from a macro perspective, it should bring rents down, which makes it more challenging as the developer or the investor to be successful. And so we look to the suburban markets where there's a lot of things we don't have to worry about with that. We don't have to worry about parking. We have plenty of land, compared to land that you could buy in the urban core.
Yeah, parking's at a real premium in the urban core.
Yeah, that's certainly been a 4-letter word the last few years. So. We price our units similarly. So then it really comes down to, if you take the price conversation off the table, then it becomes a lifestyle choice.
If you are thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition 5 years ago, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional healthcare insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com.
The elusive millennials that, I feel like there's an article that comes out about the elusive millennial not wanting to buy a house or postponing having children or something like that. Someday they're, if they don't have families, they're going to want more space, because humans have a funny way of collecting things, right? Of just like accumulating stuff, and they need more space. So, that's been one of the biggest complaints that we've heard in the urban core, is they don't have enough storage or room for their space. So some of our units have basements, some of them have garages. And so at some point they're going to grow up and want to, move out to the urban core. So we've got units that are in the urban core that do very well. Our occupancy has been fantastic, but at some point, they're likely going to want to have some more land or a garage to park their car in Michigan where it snows, and so I think it's just a life cycle. And it's great that we have both of those asset classes, because you can, our tenants can kind of live through our portfolio, which is great. I mean, they could grow up with us, and then, we happen to be brokers. So whether it's us or a referral or something like that, maybe they buy a house and we, help them do that or whatever. So it's kind of a unique way to do it.
So getting back to the financial analysis, you're looking at, okay, what's the average income or median income in the certain radius? That kind of tells you, well, how much can they pay in rent? Mm-hmm. And then do you back into that as far as like, well, what can you build? And what's that cost per square foot to build it? And does the rent that you can get actually justify that build? Is that a simple way of putting it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or is that even correct?
It's certainly a part. It's kind of a long process with a lot of moving parts. And I've just been like doing it and actively working on it so long that you don't take a step back to think and say in words what we're actually doing. Right. But,
so there's an art and a science.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you don't ever really know, until it's tested, and we hope we're right. Right. But you want to make sure that you're analyzing, doing a competitive analysis of who else is in the market. Right. So who am I competing with? What else is there? I don't want to be the most expensive rents on the block. I don't want to be the cheapest rents on the block. I kind of want to land somewhere, in the middle. And right now it's tough it'd be nice if you could be the cheapest, on the block, but, with construction costs being higher nowadays and land being, everything costing more money, today, it's more difficult to be the lowest cost provider if it's a new construction type of property. So you want to see what is already in the market and what choices other tenants have, and then of course you kind of do your hard costs, soft costs, and what your land cost is. Figure that out. Figure out what you believe that you can charge in rent based on demographic analysis and comparable rental prices analysis. Project your operating expenses based on similar properties. Then that boils down to your net operating income, and then try to negotiate the best mortgage debt or mortgage financing that you can, and see how much you have left over for your return. Of course, lest we forget our returns, and then you kind of put all those pieces together, and if it makes sense, then you pull the trigger. So again, it's a lot of moving parts, but yeah, it's you want to make sure that you're getting as much information as possible to put in, garbage in, garbage out, so to speak. Once you have all the data, you stick it in the, the Excel box, shake it up, and then it says go or no go, right? So. Mm-hmm.
So do you have an example for us? I mean, you mentioned the cornfield that you started with. Tell us a little bit about the cornfield and what you did with it.
Well, that one we're about to break ground on shortly here.
So this is 2 months. So 2 years after starting.
Yeah.
So that's a good example of kind of like the pre-development phase.
Yeah.
Take us through that with the
Well, actually, probably the more I don't know if it's more interesting, but the more recent one has been that we're kind of finishing up right now has been the Knoll Townhomes in Ada, which is on Spalding and Cascade in Ada, Michigan, and
home of Amway.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And there was a site. It was there was a lot of smaller kind of scrub trees in there. There wasn't really the larger mature trees in there. We tried to save as many trees as we could, but so this site was kind of it was kind of a drive past site. Nobody really noticed it.
How many acres?
It was about 10 acres, just under 10 acres.
Okay.
So
you drove past it and you did notice it.
Yeah. Actually, one of my business partners had been working on it for a long time to do more higher density apartment project. Okay. And the community wanted something that was more geared towards home ownership. There's not a lot of rental communities in Ada to begin with. And so we thought this would be a good strategy for a townhome development. So, and that was another one. I think we worked on that one for probably, a year or two on entitlements and things like that as well. So very similar to the cornfield in a lot of ways. But that one, you have an idea for a site, and then you go to the municipality and say, this is what we'd like to do. And then, you're putting a site plan together with the engineers and the architects, and putting architecture together for, what it's going to look like, how big they're going to be. And again, some of that has to do with, the cost analysis and what we think we can charge for rents, and is that supported by the demographics in the area? And in this case, it did, of course. So we started, we pulled the trigger on architectural and engineering, and we present that to the municipality, and you go through this process of telling them what you want to build, and they put the zoning and PUD process in place so that you can break ground and start working. And that whole process
zoning and PUD process. What?
Yeah. So you go into whatever municipality it is that you're working in, and you request the approval to build what you want to build. And sometimes the site can be zoned already. If it's already zoned for you to be able to build residential units there, then great. But you still have to go and confirm your site plan and your density, and confirm for them that it conforms with their ordinance. So if all those things are in line with their master plan and their ordinance, and what they want to see on that particular site, then they, say, yep, we agree with you. You can build what you want to build, and kind of go from there. But it's a lot of push and pull, and it's a lot of conversation about what it's going to look like, and the neighboring community, or the neighboring residents in the area get to come, and it's a public process, so everybody gets a say in what you're doing. They get their chance to discuss their concerns or support, or whatever. And it's a pretty collaborative process.
But it sounds like it took you about 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, because you'll submit something, and then they'll say, well, we'd really like to see this, this, and this, whether it's more landscaping or a sidewalk or different things like that. And so we go back and we, kind of retool the site plan and come back and say, we did this, this, and this. We can't do this, this, or this, or, those types of things. So it's kind of a back and forth. And that's what takes so long, is getting on the agendas and, actually going back and doing the, engineering and architecture work. And so it's a pretty grueling process.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And the PUD, that's a property use development?
Planned.
Or planned?
I think, it's a planned unit development, I think is what it stands for.
Right.
I don't know. I say PUD for so long, you forget what the alphabet soup letters are. So,
but it's basically something that says, here's what you can do on this 10 acres.
Yeah.
So I guess, we talked about, is this a sexy occupation to be in, developing? Taking 2 years and probably committing a substantial amount of money to this process, not knowing if it's actually going to happen or not. That's probably one of the less sexy aspects of development.
Yeah. Yeah, we all have our day in the sun, right? My students, I always start my class with, what do you want to learn? Why are you taking this class? Because I have a lot of real estate majors, but there's some people that are just, marketing majors, or finance majors, or accounting, or whatever, and they're taking it as an elective. And almost all of them, half of them will say, well, I watched HGTV and I want to flip houses. And then the other half of them say they want to be real estate developers, or those types of things. So,
like Donald Trump.
Yeah, sure, right?
I want to be president someday.
Yeah. Yeah, you always see these, successful developers in the news and stuff. And I feel like everybody thinks we drive sports cars and we all make $1 million a year and all that stuff. And, that's true sometimes, but if you're a good athlete, you get to drive sports cars and make $1 million a year too. So I think it just has to do with people who are successful doing it and people who are not as successful doing it. And I think that a lot of the hard work and the planning commission meetings and the design meetings that we have with our architects and engineers and stuff, a lot of that happens behind the scenes in a way, so they don't see us grueling, our long days and things like that. They only see us when we're breaking ground and we're in the news and stuff like that, which is great, but it's a lot of hard work. And just like anything else, it's you get what you put into it, you get out of it what you put into it,
and it takes a lot of patience too.
Exactly.
You go through a 2-year process where you're working with the municipality, probably dealing with some complaints from the neighbors or people in the community who don't want you there.
Yep.
You have to have a lot of patience.
There's some of that sometimes, but you know what? We need to take that into account too. I mean, we don't want to build something that the community doesn't want, and we never want to do that. And we're almost never going to make everybody happy either. So it's a compromise in a lot of ways with those types of aspects of it. But yeah, it's, and it's a 2-year approval process so that you can start.
Yeah. So so that was 2 years ago. You're going to be breaking ground very soon here.
Yeah. So I'm kind of bouncing around. So that project is actually in Caledonia. We bought a cornfield down in Caledonia.
Okay. So that was a cornfield.
Yeah. And that was actually
the one
a
that's going to be
cornfield.
breaking ground.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that one took us 2 years to get to the approval process and pulling all the other balloons together,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's to get us to, okay, now we can start building it. Okay. So now we'll have another roughly 16 to 18 months of construction and lease up period before we're full. That's an 88 unit project, but it's almost identical to our Ada project as well, and so we'll be breaking ground on that one shortly. So
Caledonia is notoriously hard to develop in, isn't it? I mean, I thought Caledonia was pretty restrictive on what they allow. Yeah,
and a lot of communities are. I think they're just afraid of the unknown. A lot of people, and I'm not speaking specifically about Caledonia per se, but anytime we go and we want to build something, I think it's the fear of the unknown. They think that my favorite comment we got at public comment from one of the neighbors, and it was not in Caledonia. I want to caveat that, but in the past we've had someone say, well, if you build this, gangs are going to come in, and it was just such a unjustified comment, and certainly not true of that. And the truth is we build these things and nothing happens. Traffic stays the same. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, except there's more tax revenue coming in, right?
Yeah,
it's usually it's usually good things that happen once we're done. But again, they're afraid of traffic and light contamination, meaning lights shining onto their property from other people's properties, and so again, it's a collaborative compromise of a process. And actually, Caledonia was really great to work with. We actually had one of the board members, I think he was on the planning commission actually too, but we had one of the planning commissioners who was just absolutely wonderful to work with. His name was John Daly, and he was instrumental in helping us get approved and create a project that would be beneficial for everyone, and certainly kind of a benefit to the community. And we decided, because he was so helpful, to name one of our roads after him. Uh-huh. So we named one, and he spells it a little bit different, but it's called Daily Drive today, and it's spelled EY. And so it's certainly kind of a moniker to him. And we confirmed that with his family that was okay to do because he was so helpful. And then unfortunately he passed away shortly after our project was approved. And so it was kind of a nice homage, but it wasn't meant to be that way. But it's kind of nice that it'll kind of, his name will live on within our community, because we certainly appreciated working with them and everybody down in Caledonia. I mean, it was a good process, but it does take a long time, and it can be grueling at times.
And and it sounds like even development is a people process.
It really is.
Yeah, you have to get along with people and seek help from people like
exactly.
Mr. Daly. We kind of talked through the pre-development phase, getting through that first 2 years or whatever, from cornfield to breaking ground. Let's talk about the breaking ground part. I mean, what happens there? Do you just go out with a shovel and start building, or do you hire a crew? I mean, what do you
get our hammer and nails and then go out there?
Buy some wood at Home Depot.
So I've worked with a lot of amazing general contractors in West Michigan on these particular projects that we're working on. Orion Construction is our contractor on it. So they do all the cost estimating, and they bid out the different subcontractors that do all the different divisions, construction divisions, and they manage the whole process. So we've got site work going. So when we break ground, we're kind of moving dirt and balancing the site, really just shuffling dirt around and putting utilities in, putting the water, sewer, all that kind of stuff, and then really just going through the construction process. And so we work together alongside with them to manage our construction construction process and make sure that everything goes smoothly. And then at some point along that process, we bring in our management team. We've got 2 leasing agents that work with us to start working on pre-leasing activities. So as an example, on the Knoll, we've been pre-leasing through winter, which is not an easy task because most people don't want to move during Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and even when there's just snow on the ground. But we've been tracking with a 50% absorption rate, meaning when we've had, when units have come online and we have certificate of occupancy for those units, we've been leasing about 50% of all the available units that come online. So if we had 20 units available, we had 10 signed leases and so forth. So we're about halfway through that project, and that's a pretty amazing feat in the wintertime to have that type of absorption rate during construction. I didn't mention that our landscaping is not fully in, and there's construction equipment on site still and things like that. So God bless our residents that are living in that development during construction.
That's the development?
It is, yep.
Great. So how far? So that's the construction phase. So you're still in the construction phase.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a number of the units online.
Yeah,
already.
we should be fully complete by the end of April. Or middle of May, I believe. Okay. So that's, you really try to hit the spring time because, the sun's out, people are out, doing stuff. They're out looking at real estate and different things like that. So that's really the sweet spot and the good time to lease. Sometimes you don't have control over that with when you get approvals because, again, it can be kind of a wild card of when you get the municipal approval to break ground and start going. Alongside everything else you got to, put in place with the financing and construction and all that. But when the stars align, you just get going, and you can't really control when units start coming online all the time. You try to. So it'll be exciting. This spring is really going to be exciting because we're really impressed and surprised with how well our leasing's gone in the wintertime.
Well, which is great because you're proving your concept. You're proving what you had thought all along,
right?
In doing this. So are you getting the rents that you had budgeted and anticipated?
Yeah, actually we're actually increasing rents on some of our units right now.
Oh, great.
We've built a few we call them 0-step units. Because of the nature of the construction of our project, we weren't required to construct any handicap accessible units, but we built 4 of them anyway because sometimes people just don't like to do stairs.
Yeah.
And what we've noticed is those have been the most popular units because they live more like a single family home because it's all on one level, so to speak. And so when you're downsizing or whatever the case may be, or when you're getting older and you don't want to do stairs anymore, it's kind of a nice unit to be in. And we were kind of going off square footage because they're a little bit smaller than our 2-story units, and so we were kind of pricing rents off of a per square foot rate. And what we're finding is there was so much demand for those units that we're able to increase the rents for those.
Great. And
then there's also some units that there was a wetland on this particular site that you can't build in wetlands unless you go to the DEQ and ask permission and stuff like that. Nor would we want to because it creates a wonderful kind of landscape feature that we don't have to pay for. It's already there. So there's some units that have just wonderful views of this wetland area, and it's wooded and all this kind of stuff. And those ones are going to likely generate a premium as well, just because of where they're located on the site and the views and all that stuff. So you feel like you're living in the woods and that kind of thing. So that's been interesting.
Are you able to amend your plans on the other units that you're still building based on the fact that the 0-step units are making?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't even say we amended it. We kind of used Ada as a template for our future projects. And so we're essentially doing the same project on Michigan Street, which is Michigan Meadows, which is between Plymouth and the East Beltline. We're building 88 units over there.
Oh, really?
And it's the same.
Great location.
Yeah, it really is. And it's the same product type. And then when we started working on Caledonia, we added a lot more 0-step units. I think we've got 8 or 10 of them down there. And it's just how the site lays out and where they will fit best on the site. And some of them actually have basements, which kind of defeats the purpose of being 0-step. But, again, we kind of see...
And 0-step, by the way, means there's no steps. People in wheelchairs can get in and out and around the unit without without having to worry about being
Right.
obstructed by stairs.
Exactly. That's why I say we should probably change the name of them with the ones with the basements anyway, because technically there will be steps, but those will be nice too, because again, they live kind of more like a ranch style home because it's all on one level, and so they're very popular. So we try to be conservative. We don't want to talk ourselves into deals. We'd like to say that our rents are going to be a certain level and be surprised that they're higher. We don't want to be surprised the other way, right?
Sure.
So-
Yes. So as developer, you're the one who's basically putting all this together from
Yep.
A to Z. You're hiring companies like Orion to come in and do the construction. You're hiring the architect to do the plans
Yep.
and engineers and all that. And then hiring the leasing team or management company once the property's up and done. That's the job of the developer.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say it's like the middleman, which I think is kind of undervaluing what it is. That we
I
do.
would say it's like a movie producer.
Yeah,
I
you would.
come from the film. The film.
It's probably a lot like that.
background, and,
Yeah.
the movie producer is the one who puts everything together.
Right.
Finds the actors, finds the director, finds the script.
Right.
Finds the financing. While the
I've never
executive
produced a
producer
movie,
finds-
but I would imagine it's
But
like that.
it would be a similar.
Yeah, I never
similar
thought about
process.
that. The analogy I always like is, we're the ones that pull the balloons together. So if you think of like balloons, all over a room, you're kind of going around grabbing the, strings and pulling them all together. So yeah, it's really key to get good people in place. And we actually, so we started our own kind of management division. And so we actually do all of our own leasing and property management and stuff like
through
that.
Pure real estate.
It is. Yeah. It's technically a sister company, but it's Pure Real Estate Management. And then we've got Pure Real Estate Brokerage. And so, brokerage is really kind of doing some consulting, really acquisition, brokerage, and consulting. So that could be leasing. We help people buy buildings and redevelop them and different things like that.
So you help other people through the process
Yeah.
of acquiring or developing or
Yeah,
leasing.
every development that we do is ends up becoming its own entity. It's always like 123 address LLC. A lot of times you see that properties are owned by they're called special purpose entities or specific
Do you
purpose
typically
entities.
have multiple partners in each entity?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got our development partners, and then oftentimes we'll have investor partners that come along with us. And
So you're bringing in private money, private investors to
Yeah.
help finance or put up the equity for a lot of this.
yep. And it's a great way for them to diversify their portfolios too. If they're in stocks, bonds, whatever, it's a fun way to get exposure to real estate as well. So
Yeah, in a passive way.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let you do all the work, and they can make a good passive
Sure.
return.
Yeah, they can put the hard hat on and
they
come
can
play
visit the
developer
site.
for a day. It's fun. So
It is. It really is. You've kind of touched on it, on all of it. The pre-development, the development, and then the post-development. You touched on it, which is filling up the units.
yeah, that's the
And
fun
you
part.
Have the lease. Is that the fun part? Why is that the fun part?
I don't know. I guess it's the fun part for me. Everybody's different and they enjoy different things. But for me, I like I think, Mayor George Hartwell always said, I like going to groundbreakings, but I much prefer ribbon cuttings, which I'm the same way, because that's kind of the fruits of the labor of, because again, it's probably 3.5 years down the road that you're actually cutting the ribbon, and now you've have something that you've created. It went from the piece of dirt that you bought, to finished product. And it's always wonderful to see, a well-executed plan come together, of course. So that's the fun part, is seeing the before and after and being involved throughout the whole process. And then of course, leasing is a big part of that. And actually, that's kind of an interesting one too. With the residential real estate market, the way it has been, we were actually just looking up the statistics for January the other day, and I believe there was 1,100 active listings in Kent County, and there's currently roughly 3,000 active GRAR members on the residential MLS board.
Oh.
That's not very much inventory, and that's a lot of people not eating lunch. So one of the things we thought of is, why don't we lease our townhome units on the MLS for lease? And it turns out they already have a method to do that in their system. So we're working through the process of doing that now. But just for round numbers, let's just say our rents are $2,000 a month or something like that. What we're proposing is that, we'll do a 13-month lease with a tenant. We'll take, that 13th month and burn it on commissions and just split it, between the two sides. So, if that realtor's getting, $500 or $1,000, whatever their splits are, that's not nothing. And it gives them a way to, gives them a revenue generating opportunity. And then they can put the reminder in their phone for 12 months later to sell them a house or whatever the case may be, and so that's kind of an innovative leasing strategy that we've been working on, because we're doing everything else, and it's like, when we saw that, it's like, there may be an opportunity here. And now we go from having 2 leasing agents to having 3,000 leasing agents. Yeah. Isn't that great? So that's been
a really great idea.
Yeah. And, like I say, we have the ability to convert these units to condos. We're not going to do that off the bat right away. But once they do, now we've got the relationships with the realtors in the community, and they can help us sell our units.
Yeah, they're familiar with it. So is that your exit plan then? I mean, or is your exit plan just flexible? It could be hold for a long period of time, and collect rents, or convert to condos and take the payoff.
Yeah. Again, it kind of depends on what the economy is doing. And I'm careful not to commit to anything here. You don't have a signature block on this paper, right? So
no, you have to tell me exactly what you're going to do. I want to know when and how.
Yeah. Well, again, it kind of depends on what the economy is doing. And my business partners have been doing this for 30 years, and they've done 1,000 units, and every single one of those units has converted to a condo unit and sold to the. So
your track record shows that eventually you'll sell.
Yeah, it's possible, and that's kind of what we try to commit to, which is, our track record would speak to the fact that we want to convert these to home ownership down the road and do that. But, if we had another 2008 where nobody can get a mortgage, well, that's not going to do us any good, and it's not going to do the residents any good. And we don't want to have a bunch of foreclosures on our hands, so we need to be very strategic about when we do that and how we do that. And is there a market, within the economy to be able to do that? So it creates that ability for us to do it. And it's one avenue of an exit strategy for us. Or, we could just sell it as a rental apartment community. There's been a lot of big numbers thrown around on some of the apartment communities that have sold in the last few, years or months. So we have the ability to do that as well. Or we can just hold on to it forever and collect our rent checks, so it kind of creates ultimate flexibility for exit strategy. Yeah.
So clear up a misconception that I may have, which is that developers are developing these as condos, but they have to rent them out first because of the financing structure, because the lenders make it very hard to just lend on condos. I mean, is there something to that, or is that a misconception that I have?
No, it comes down to there's so many stakeholders on these projects. And, when we were talking about the approval process, I mean, there's stakeholders in the process, and what is it that they want in their community? And again, I think I was making the comment about bringing gangs in. I think anytime there's a rental community, it's going to bring gangs in, whatever.
It brings a bad element.
Yeah. It brings values down or different things like that, which is just, it's a little silly. I mean, it's true sometimes, but it's certainly not for our projects.
Yeah. So. Unless you're getting like some sort of government subsidy or grants or something, you're building A-class units that are going to attract higher.
Yeah. And that's a function of
renters.
Sure. And, it's like whether you go into residential or commercial real estate, I think it's the same way with affordable housing or market rate housing. Now, and everybody thinks market rate housing is really high rents, but it's really just housing that's not subsidized.
Right.
And
what can the market pay?
Sure. And subsidized housing is its own animal, and we don't know how to do it, admittedly. And there's
different niche.
Yeah, there's some great organizations in Grand Rapids that do those types of projects. We don't know how to do them. So we're just staying in our lane, and a lot of people, talk about that. And so, we don't focus on that type of housing anyhow.
You're teaching this. You're teaching real estate development and finance and all that.
Yeah.
What are some other common misconceptions that you encounter with your students or just other people who are curious about what you do?
One of the major ones that I've gotten from my students is that when you're in commercial, you make so much more money than in residential. And I thought that was kind of an interesting
from the development side?
From the development side or brokerage or, the different things. One of the things I try to tell my students is, real estate is like any other career path, or major program where if you go to school for finance or accounting, you don't have to go be an accountant or, or whatever. There's so many different things that you can do. So whether you're a realtor and you're selling homes, or you become a commercial real estate broker and you're selling, buildings and things like that. I've had a lot of my students ask me about residential jobs because they think it's easier or they think it's more entry level. And I think, when you talk about misconceptions, I think the misconception is that residential real estate is somehow a prerequisite to become, to get into the commercial industry, which is simply not true.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that you focus on what you're passionate about. If you like selling houses, then you're going to be successful selling houses. If you like selling office buildings or leasing retail space, go do that. If you really love doing it, you'll be successful doing it. But there's these different kind of niche areas that you can get into, or if you like property management, you can do that. There's all these different avenues that you can go into, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make more or less money. I think you're going to make more money if you do what you're passionate about.
Absolutely. Do you have any stories you want to share with us?
I have all kinds of stories that I could share with you. One of the stories I love telling is I used to work for Rockford Construction and their development group, and that was I always say I got my master's degree from Rockford Construction because it was really kind of trial by fire. We had a lot of projects going on when I came online, and one of them, we were just starting to ramp up on the west side to start doing all the stuff that's happening on the west side of Grand Rapids. And one of the coolest projects I ever worked on was the new Holland Brewing project on the corner of Broadway and Bridge.
Yeah, great building.
Yeah, I loved it because that building is actually every asset class in one. And many people may not know that. So they distill their Knickerbocker gin on site, which is technically an industrial use and an industrial classification. And then they've got their restaurant and tap room out front, of course. And then Adtegrity is actually on the top 2 floors as their office space. That's where they're headquartered. And then we've got some inline retail and a restaurant on the hard corner. And then there's, I think, 36 or 40 apartment units above that. So it's literally every asset class, all in one building. And wow. I thought that was fascinating. It was a great project to work on. And we had to secure development incentives and financing and get the investors, on board. And there was just a lot of moving parts, and, you could, you learned the entire process by that building for any asset class, because it was every asset class, and it was very interesting.
Must have been very complex to work with the city of Grand Rapids to get the zoning and the use in place for all those different
exactly
types of uses.
Yeah, and really it started with New Holland. They wanted to be in Grand Rapids, which was great. And I've known those guys for a long time. And once you have an exciting group that wants to be somewhere and everybody's interests are aligned, I talked earlier about, all the different stakeholders in the process. And if everybody's intentions and desires are aligned, it makes the process a lot smoother. It's not going to be easy, but it makes it smoother if what you want to do, everybody wants, and everybody wanted the West Side to really come alive, and that was kind of the catalytic project.
Yeah, that was the catalyst for that West Side on Bridge Street there. I mean, that New Holland Brewery, that was really where all that development began, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And now you have a kind of the Meyer store and
they've done amazing things over there. It's when you drive over to the West Side and you can't park anywhere because everything's, I like having a parking problem personally because it means you got occupancy, you got fun stuff to be there, to go to and experience, and I think it's great.
Great. And any final thoughts for our listeners who might be considering getting into development or at the beginning phases of a development project of their own? Any wisdom you would care to share? What
we were talking about earlier is really discover what you're passionate about. The key to success in our business is just not giving up. You got to be unwaveringly persistent to get through some of these processes, because you're going to hit, inevitably you're going to hit roadblocks, and you just can't stop pushing. You got to keep pushing through to really bring your vision into a reality, because it's hard. The truth is that it's very hard to create something that doesn't exist today. So it takes a lot of hard work, and you cannot give up. I can't stress that enough. So that's why I think it starts with passion, because if you're passionate about it and you love it, then you won't give up, because it's important to you.
Fantastic advice. Bradley, thanks for sharing this process with us. It's been really interesting just talking about the development process, learning about the process that you've been through on the several different, the Caledonia project, the Ada project, and the New Holland Brewery project. I know you've got a lot of great experience in it, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Brian.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.